Okay, so first up on our list, we're going to talk about carbohydrates. These are going to be our Gryffindors, our super sugary, um, fun but sometimes annoying friends, carbohydrates. So when you think of carbs, you probably think of things like sweets, right? But you also think of building materials because they're also made of carbohydrates. And everyone knows if you want to lose weight, the first thing you should stop doing is eating carbs, right? And that means no more pastas and no more breads, right? But it also means you got to cut back on your sugars, right? The high fructose corn syrup that's in most soft drinks, cut those out. That's a carb, right? No more candy, no more sweets late at night, or cake and pie. You just can't, right? Because it's full of carbs, loaded with carbs. Some better than others, some worse than others. But carbs, cells use carbohydrates for a couple different reasons. First of all, energy. Sugar, glucose, fructose, maltose, sucrose, those simple sugars, they are energy sources, right? But if you start putting those together into a larger structure, you can actually make building materials, right? So structural materials. And also we have excess energy that we need to store, and those carbs can be used to store energy, right? So the simplest carbohydrates are sugars, and they're simply used for energy, and their two examples are the monosaccharides and the disaccharides. Both of these are simple sugars. We have simple carbs and you have complex carbs. These are all simple carbs. So monosaccharides, mono meaning one, saccharide meaning sugar, so glucose, fructose, these are very simple. Actually, it's one and two sugars because fructose is technically two glucoses hooked together, but still, it's very, very simple. Disaccharides, this is a glucose and a fructose, and then I think maltose is two sucroses, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, they're disaccharides, and they are a little bit more complex than monosaccharides, but they're still very simple sugars. One of the things you may notice about all of these is fructose, glucose, sucrose, maltose. All of these taste sweet. If you were to lick fructose, you would notice it's very, very sweet indeed. So was glucose. Lots of glucose in honey. Honey's very sweet. Maltose, what do you think's in a malt shake? Well, they use maltose. And sucrose is in a bunch of different things. And, um, uh, and so is fructose. Fructose is usually what's found in fruit. It's all the sugars that are found in there. Just keep that in mind. If it tastes sweet, it is a simple sugar, right? Wood is made of carbs as well, but wood does not taste sweet, right? Doesn't really have a flavor to it all. Or what about starch, like you found in potatoes? Well, it's a sugar, but it's not sweet. So those two would not be simple sugars. Those two would be complex sugars. So let's go and look at some complex carbs. So simple carbohydrates bond in different ways to form complex carbohydrates. So essentially, here's a nice little chart for you. If we take glucose and you put it together in big sheets, you'll end up with something called cellulose. And cellulose, as we know, is what's found in the cell wall of plants. And that's a structural material. That is what becomes wood. It's a building material. Starch is found as the energy stored in plants, right? It's how plants store energy. Yeah, they use some of the glucose. They make their photosynthesis for growing and reproducing and do whatever else they need to do. But they make a lot more than they need, and so they end up storing it. Well, how do they store it? They store it down in the roots, and they store it as starch. Now, glycogen, this is how animals store energy. Glycogen, it's not a long-term storage, though. It's usually produced and filtered out by your liver, and it's short-term, maybe an hour or two. You may have some glycogen in you once you eat something, but after that, the body starts taking that glycogen and breaks it down, restructures the carbons into lipids, and you end up storing that in your body as body fat. So these are just all some great examples of some complex carbs. Other ones are, like we mentioned earlier, there was uh, um, one called chitin on the last slide. Chitin is actually it's a structural component, and it's found in two things. One, fungi. It's what the cells in fungi use instead of cellulose, because they're not plants, right? A mushroom is not as tough as a plant. But it does have to stand up off the ground, so what does it use for structural support? It uses chitin, and that's just a form of sugar. Also, chitin is found in the exoskeleton of insects. So when you step on a bug and it crunches, that crunchy sound, that's chitin, that's sugar. Now, don't lick a roach because it's not sweet, and don't lick a mushroom because it's not sweet either. Those are complex carbs. They're not going to taste sweet. So that's pretty awesome. So let's look at a little bit more information about some of our complex carbs. So all of these little orange rings, this is a glucose molecule. This is also a glucose molecule. There's another third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, on and on and on. But when you put them together in a certain way, like if you do in this nice big flat sheet, you end up making cellulose. This is what wood is. Planting material, anything that's in the cell wall of a cell, of a plant cell rather. This is how the sugars are put together. But let's say you take those same sugars though, and you put them in a long strand and you start wrapping them up. Into like a helix shape. This is what starch looks like. This is how fruits and vegetables store that extra energy, right? And it's just in the form of starch. And then in humans, we store fat as well, or it's not for store fat, sorry, we store sugar as well, not for a long time, but we store it as a form called glycogen. It's the same glucoses, but instead of one long chain that's spiraled up, it's one long chain that has smaller branches coming off of it. And it's good for a while. Like I said, it's usually produced in our liver. And it helps us to, you get a little burst of energy after you eat something sweet. Eat an apple, go climb a mountain or something, you'll get that burst of energy. And usually that's going to come from the glycogen that's stored. But again, it's not long-term storage. Long-term storage in us is going to be in the form of lipids. So we don't want that glycogen to get to the lipids. So don't eat sugary stuff late at night, and don't work out on a full stomach. Work out on an empty stomach, because your body pulls from the stomach first. If there's nothing there, then it goes and starts pulling from glycogen. If there's nothing there, then it goes and starts pulling your reserves and your belly fat. So if you want to lose weight when you're working out, don't eat before you go work out. Watch your sugar though, okay? Don't drink sugary stuff while you're working out, and that includes Gatorade and Powerade. That stuff's full of sugar. It's not gonna. It's gonna pull from the sugar that's in that, and not the sugar that's in the fat that's stored in your body.